By the late 1990s, Shawn Michaels established himself as one of the greatest wrestlers in the history of the WWF. Coming up with Marty Jannetty in the late 80s as part of the tag team The Rockers, HBK complemented the already vibrant vibe of the Golden Era with colorful attires and high-flying wrestling. The Rockers captivated the fans with some very unique offense, and while it didn't result in championship gold, they had their place in history as one of the greatest tag teams to never officially win the WWF Tag Team Championships. HBK had dreams of a grandeur career and left his partner in the dust and broken glass. In doing so, Michaels shed the tie-dye colors in favor of a pair of sunglasses and sensational sherry. Michaels as the Heartbreak Kid found great success in Stara as the flamboyant, arrogant upstart. HBK entertained on the mic and in-ring and always had a chip on his shoulder. At times, this was to his own detriment. Shades of a scrappy underdog were hidden in plain sight, and seeing the reaction from women and kids, the WWF pushed him as a babyface. It was not a good fit character-wise, but HBK only stepped it up in-ring and became the most outstanding wrestler of 1996, the WWF champion, and cemented himself as an all-time great in the World Wrestling Federation. However, it wasn't all positives for Shawn Michaels. Outside the ring, he had underlying problems that would soon grow to affect the way he acted. Initially, he developed a substance abuse problem. This was apparent around 1993 amidst his Intercontinental Championship reign. He failed a drug test, although if they tested the rest of the roster at the time, there would be 3 wrestlers left or something. Hell, even that's a doubt. His suspension opened way for Razor Ramon to become champion, which of course led to the IC titles being defended at WrestleMania 10 in a ladder match. Shawn's drug problems would slowly come to fruition, and at a time where he was supposed to celebrate being the #1 guy, he was under a tremendous amount of stress in light of staggering TV ratings and pay-per-view buys, and that drug use only increased. His behavior was already bad. He fought Marines at a bar and took a beating. Was it one Marine? Basically controlled the locker room with a click, and best of all, throwing a fit during his title match with Vader at SummerSlam 1996. But 1997 was a whole other story. He kicked off the year winning the WWF Championship only to forfeit because he lost his smile. In reality, HBK claimed to hurt his knee, but this was timed very well. Bret Hart was supposed to win back the WWF title in a rematch with him at WrestleMania 13. Upon his return, he made a Sunny Days reference that related to Bret Hart and Sunny's rumored thing, which led to a big brawl backstage with the Hitman, and the fallout saw HBK threaten to quit the company. Michaels was becoming more of a liability inside and outside the ring. There was this one instance where Raw was taped and the Undertaker, who was feuding with him, wasn't around. He shot a backstage promo that tied into HBK's promo, and what did this smart man do? He tried goading him out to the ring, which made the Undertaker look cowardly. He wasn't in the arena for that episode. Then, of course, HBK trying to exercise his power and take the European Championship as a power move and losing it in the stupidest way, next to forfeiting for no reason. Bulldog should have won in England. He dedicated that match to his dying sister. There was no reason for Shawn Michaels to win here. Well, I'm sure all you guys know, but by 1998, HBK was out of control. On TV, this man's charisma was off the charts. It was so ridiculous, but that came at a price. He was snorting the finest, taking painkillers, somas, and it was only getting worse. You see, when you do coke and take all kinds of pills, you lose your train of thought. It made for good TV, however that wasn't sustainable. A back injury during the casket match at the Raw Rumble was the beginning of the end. Michaels was unable to get out of bed, let alone compete in matches. His inclusion in the WrestleMania 14 build with Stone Cold was severely limited. Nothing physical, and even then HBK was pissed, having to drop the title to the next biggest thing out there, and at one point having a battery thrown at him. It was a walking on eggshells moment for everyone else, hoping and praying that Shawn Michaels actually made it to WrestleMania, because in that instance, he walked out and had to be convinced to return and finish his promo. There was no doubts about the result from WWF's end, and despite a moment involving The Undertaker having to tape his wrists and prepare if Shawn Michaels refuses to do business, he dropped the title and quietly retired as an in-ring performer. Michaels didn't have the most gracious departure. If anything, it felt like they were moving on entirely from him, as evident by Tyson covering his face with a DX shirt in the next episode of Raw's War, featuring almost no mention of him. HBK main evented the most purchased WrestleMania up to that point as the champion, yet watching that episode of Raw, it's like he never existed, despite being the most prominent part of that show. The WWF was well into the Attitude Era, and while Michaels did play a strong part in ushering that era, it would be a lie to say they needed him, because they didn't. Austin grew more and more as the guy, DX was under new management and flying high, and it should be noted that while Michaels did eventually retire, the belief at this point was that he would still return, because while he had 2 herniated discs, this break was more about clearing his mind. It didn't take long for the Heartbreak Kid to return to TV. He returned on the July 6, 1998 episode of Raw's War as a color commentator. HBK returned as a babyface, and the crowd was excited to see him. He didn't really do any wrestling, but there was this one moment involving him using a steel chair to save China from the nation, showing his close allegiance to DX. He wasn't the same guy though. He was clearly not wrestling, of course, but on commentary, there was clearly problems with him. He wasn't speaking as well as he previously did, but that didn't stop them from making Shawn Michaels the commissioner of the WWF, a role which saw him play the corporation's right-hand man in their battles against DX. This was mostly done since HBK was still making $750,000 under his performer's contract. The entire reason why he interacted with DX in that way was for a potential match with the leader of DX, Triple H, at WrestleMania 15. This was just a heavily rumored match. They were heavily considering it, but it was all scrapped. That was all cancelled because HBK had to undergo surgery on those discs, leading to his retirement. Michaels already showed doubts about a potential return only a week earlier, saying, and I quote, "It's a matter of looking at the risk versus rewards ratio. It's time to say that's a wrap. I've accomplished many things in the ring, including reaching the top as a world champion. If I hadn't won the title, then perhaps I'd still be trying to get back in the ring one way or another. But you had to start thinking about your personal life." And after the doctors learned that the damage done on one of those discs at the Royal Rumble, he was advised to retire. HBK still had the possibility of having a few matches in the future, but it was a path he deviated away from. Michaels' in-ring career had come to a close, and by this point he was already cemented as an all-time great for the WWF. It was around this time he launched his own wrestling school, which gave a platform for the likes of Paul London, Lance Cade, and Bryan Danielson to develop. Commissioner role was limited because of the usual reasons, but he was still making an impact one way or another. Mick Foley had done a tremendous amount of work to earn the respect of the fans, to the point where he physically harmed himself for their entertainment. And coupled with a very likable personality, a personality of an underdog that fought tooth and nail for everything he achieved, it paid off with the WWF Championship. Mankind was about to earn a spot on the WrestleMania main event if Vince Russo was to be believed. However, HBK got in Austin's ear, and that match changed to a singles match with The Rock. Kevin Kelly verified that claim and also added that Foley's wife was left in tears. Mick Foley, though, painted an entirely different picture, which was in line with Shawn Michaels' feud with The Rock. Here's what he had to say in his book, and I quote, "While my knee was being mended in one room, my career was being upended in another, where a decision was made to scrap me for the WrestleMania main event. It seems to me that some people thrive on controversy as well as dissension. Former wrestler Shawn Michaels not only seemed to thrive on it, but it seemed to have a genuine talent at creating it, which he did on this day by convincing all parties involved that the WrestleMania main event had to be a one-on-one contest. Shawn had main evented several Manias and believed the integrity of the event would be hurt by a three-way match. Ironically, Shawn was actually pushing for me to remain in the match, but was outvoted. Instead, I was asked to drop the belt to The Rock in a ladder match later on that night's Raw, and saw my WrestleMania dream disappear." Okay, that's a new one for me. The Rock was the #1 heel in the company and a rising star. His position in the main event of WrestleMania was where he belonged. So HBK trying to politic from the stands is kind of funny. This is a story I believe. I'm pretty sure this is the true one. I'm just assuming, obviously, but it makes a lot of sense to me. As you could see, he was causing trouble whenever he had the chance. Stone Cold and The Rock were coming in clutch in the ring, while HBK always showed up to make problems. A couple of months later, he was involving himself with the SummerSlam main event. There's a big rumor going around that Austin refused to put over Triple H on a night which on paper seemed intended for the game to have his crowning moment. So Mankind won the title. The story is disputed, but clear as day, Shawn Michaels out here talking about how others should be doing business. It's funny because this wasn't long after his time of refusing to lose to others. Here's what he had to say in a WWF.com interview in August of 1999, and I quote, "I heard about how great the dressing room is and how the locker room scene was and how everybody loved each other. Well, it is a lot better than it used to be, but there's still guys going around saying that this person won't do this or that person won't do that. Triple H, as far as I'm concerned, he was dicked. He should have been the champion before he was. The fact that he is now, that's great. He deserves it, but he deserved it at SummerSlam, plain and simple. It's the way it should have been." And when asked if it was a political move, he said, "I have no idea. I'm not around enough. Or I wasn't enough around to know. I hear different stories from different people. I've been in this business way too long to know when any story I'm getting it is not the correct one. I've never been into rumor and gossip. Being one who has enough of it said about you, you make sure you don't get into it. So I don't know. I don't have enough information to make a judgment on it. All I know is that SummerSlam should have been Triple H against Steve Austin, and Triple H should have come out in the winner. It's unfortunate. All I know is that Steve was hurt. I guess someone felt it's necessary to put another guy in there. Hey, I would have loved to have that luxury at WrestleMania 14. Bruce Pritchard added, sometimes someone won't get their way every once in a while, and he said, right, I don't have a problem with that. That's why I hope to bring something to Triple H, and that's because that anybody who knows me in the wrestling business knows that if it was Shawn Michaels in that match, that would have happened. It would have gone down the way it was supposed to go down. They were kind of annoyed over him talking all this nonsense on WWF.com. Then shortly afterwards had a fight or an argument with The Rock in the back over a rough super kick during the SmackDown main event between The Rock and Triple H. HBK was a special guest referee. So he's like, you shouldn't be in this business if you can't take that. There's obviously heat and dissension between the two, stemming from Rocky Maivia debuting and being bullied by the Clique, or in this case, Triple H and Shawn Michaels. WWF weren't bringing him in despite being the commissioner because anytime he came in, drama came out. On the side, HBK was a sports reporter in San Antonio. It was a small little thing, and he even officiated a match in Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling in November of 1999. His behavior and attitude was so bad that they weren't really worried about him going to WCW because it was only going to harm the company. WCW was number 2, and I don't think 1999 Shawn Michaels, of all people, was going to save them. If anything, it's a blessing he didn't go because his story probably would have ended there. HBK was taking pills and doing all kinds of things away from the ring. What was he going to do when he had to wrestle or travel every week? And JR made mention of the WCW thing as well as the $750K thing during an episode of Grilling JR. And I quote, "We paid Shawn $750,000 a year for about 4 years to do nothing because he was Vince's guy. Every time we go over budgets and things, where are we at with the Shawn contract? Nothing, leave it alone." Okay, Vince didn't have to do that. Here's the deal. All Shawn wanted to do was go work and go play with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. So that would have been for WCW nice to get a gift of Shawn Michaels, wouldn't you think? So he took good care of him. $750K, but it came with a price. HBK had endured some very tough times in his life, and that title reign, as great as it was, ended up being bad for his mental and physical health, because he ended up abusing drugs more, and by 2000, it led to everyone avoiding him. He had just gotten married and had a kid, yet still hadn't cleaned himself up, which was becoming more and more of a problem since his kid was slowly growing up. Nonetheless, Michaels found a way to make his unofficial return to wrestling in his own promotion in April of 2000. He faced Venom, also known as Paul Diamond, his old partner in AWA, and Max Moon. It was a hardcore match for the promotion's World Championship, and Michaels, despite his back, put in some work. He didn't take rough spots and even managed to hit an elbow from the top of the ladder to win the title and ironically relinquish it. This match was somewhat known, but footage didn't surface until 2013, and with that, a seed was planted for Shawn Michaels to get that itch to return to the World Wrestling Federation. Now, it's not really known when the back was healed up, but if I had to guess personally, 2000. Up to this point, HBK didn't show interest in a return, and another thing to mention is that he wasn't away due to the back. He was, but it wasn't the real reason. It's because of the drugs. Otherwise, they would have put him as an on-screen character and have him appear often, but he didn't. There was this time period from 1999 to 2000, specifically from September of 1999 to May of 2000, HBK did not make a single appearance in a WWF ring. It was crazy. But he was a bit motivated. He was ready to get prepared to return. As 2000 was coming to a close, HBK and the WWF renegotiated his contract to include the possibility of an in-ring return. There was consideration for a retirement match at WrestleMania 17, with HBK officially retiring afterwards. The contract was signed, but Shawn Michaels wasn't going to wrestle at WrestleMania. Instead, there was a story with the game. Jim Ross had close contact with HBK throughout this entire time, and the contract was 3 years. Shawn Michaels was supposed to get involved with the Undertaker and Triple H match at WrestleMania, and reading up on the stories from that time, it seemed like Triple H was supposed to be his first opponent. But then he was wasted and absolutely lost backstage during an episode of Raw or SmackDown. He thought Chris Jericho was repackaged as Doink due to his disguise, and later Michaels passed out in Vince's office and they got rid of him. But before leaving, he scolded Triple H and cussed him out in front of the locker room, straining the relationship. Michaels didn't appear on SmackDown that week or WrestleMania 17. He was gone. And throughout 2001, a year where HBK was supposed to return and shock the world, he kept a low profile. Michaels wasn't changing at all. If anything, it had gotten worse. His kid was getting older, and HBK had a moment where everything changed. His kid thought he was sleeping when in reality, he was passed out. He was lost. And this is where HBK of before ends and HBK of new starts. He randomly went to a church during this time period and embraced Christianity. He felt that it was a beacon of hope and light. He thought that that was what he needed in life. Of course, change wasn't happening overnight, but WWF was starting to bring him back. He appeared on a weekly show of theirs called Excess in December of 2001, and there's no footage of that at the moment, but HBK did appear at the Royal Rumble a month later. He was in WWF New York. He was interviewed there. He was asked about the show, a couple of stuff like that, and he looked much healthier and in tune with everybody else. Despite this change, there was still one more thing the Heartbreak Kid had to do: fix his issues with the game. Kevin Nash played a strong part in bringing them back and played the role of a mediator. He calls Triple H, all's well, and HBK is in a much better position to return to the WWF. And with the ratings decline and the departures of Austin and Rock, they called him up on the June 3rd, 2002 episode of Raw as a member of the NWO. That's strange in itself, but HBK was back, and he was back for the better. Was HBK a different man? Yes. He clearly changed up to this point. Everything about him, his attitude, the way he acted, and the backstage reports at the time saw wrestlers being surprised. They were like, what the hell, he's actually changed? It was a crazy turnaround from a man who was pilled up and absolutely lost a year ago, thinking Chris Jericho was Doink the Clown. It was a change for the better, and it all started with that moment with HBK and his kid. From there, he just didn't see a future, a positive future with his kid, if he would continue down that road. It just wasn't going to work. This led to the whole Triple H and NWO thing, which of course led to SummerSlam and his eventual return, which led to a second run, which nobody expected to happen. Everyone thought, oh, HBK is going to come back. Oh, Survivor Series. Maybe that's it. Comes back for WrestleMania 19, and from there, it was a full-time thing. It was great. Shawn Michaels is a prime example of anybody can change. Of course, at times he's shown the old HBK, but it was never a consistent thing about him. The second run managed to cement him as an all-time great again. And he was already an all-time great, but that in itself managed to cement him in some people's eyes as the greatest wrestler of all time. And that's a sentiment many people share. So yeah. Alright, what do you guys think of Shawn Michaels, his redemption, his return? Please comment down below. That's for his video. Make sure you hit the elbow on the like button and perhaps the sweet chin music on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.